In her previous life, Caspian chose to fake his own death just to play out a fantasy with his true love. He lived a blissfully happy life with her, while Ariadne worked tirelessly to manage the Hawthorne family's business. Eventually, she fell terminally ill from severe overwork and lovesickness. However, upon hearing the news, he returned only to wait for her to draw her last breath, planning to marry his true love in the world's most luxurious wedding right after. She died, coughing up blood, her eyes wide open with lingering grievance. Reborn, Ariadne refused to be a pawn in their sick romance game anymore. She chose to tearfully inherit Caspian's commercial empire. Since the scumbag was dead, there was no need for him to ever come back. Hey everyone, have you ever sacrificed everything for someone who completely took you for granted? Today's story shows exactly what happens when a woman stops loving blindly and uses logic and financial independence as her weapons. Let's get into this epic comeback. Promotion, newfound wealth, and a dead husband. She had finally hit the jackpot of the three greatest joys in a woman's life. Just like in her previous life, while she was working overtime negotiating deals for the Hawthorne Group, she received the news of her husband's death. His two childhood friends, looking completely heartbroken, told her, "Ariadne, please accept our condolences. Caspian had an accident while bungee jumping. He fell to the bottom of the ravine. We searched for him all day but couldn't find him. It's highly likely he didn't make it." Ariadne and her husband, Caspian, were a textbook example of an arranged marriage between two families of equal social standing. He was known as the golden boy of the elite circle. Anyone with eyes could see that the Sinclair family had been going downhill for years. Although Ariadne was a daughter of the Sinclair family, having a stepmother meant having a negligent father. She had a poor relationship with the Sinclairs, so Grandpa Hawthorne wasn't worried that she would siphon off her in-laws' wealth to her maiden family. Unlike Caspian, who possessed absolutely zero talent for business, Ariadne had inherited a fair amount of her parents' business acumen. That was exactly why Grandpa Hawthorne chose her to marry his precious grandson, hoped she could help Caspian keep the Hawthorne family afloat. At first, Caspian's attitude toward her was indifferent, but later, he seemingly fell for her, transforming into the ultimate doting husband in the media's eyes. Upon hearing the news of Caspian's death, Ariadne pretended to be utterly devastated. "What did you just say?" she asked. "Caspian is dead? And it was a bungee jumping accident?" Lachlan, one of his childhood friends, cautiously explained. "The search and rescue team scoured the bottom of the mountain for a whole day and night, but they still haven't found any trace of him. The captain said they can't rule out the possibility that wild animals dragged him away." Hearing this, Ariadne instantly broke down crying, tears streaming down her face as if a dam had burst. "I don't believe it. He promised we would celebrate our golden anniversary together decades from now. We love each other so much. How could he suddenly be gone forever?" The two men were completely at a loss as she wept. Ronan spoke up to comfort her. "Ariadne, Caspian is gone, but you have to pull yourself together. You need to help him manage the family business now. Besides, if he's watching from heaven, he definitely wouldn't want to see you this sad." Acting entirely unreasonable, she screamed at them. "He does extreme sports all the time. Free solo climbing, alpine skiing, sky surfing, bungee jumping. He's the absolute best at all of them. And now you're telling me he got himself killed just bungee jumping? I don't believe it." Lachlan handed her the wedding ring that Caspian had supposedly taken off before the jump. Avoiding her gaze, he said, "Caspian's dying wish would definitely be for the Hawthorne Group to continue thriving. I know you love him deeply, so you'll certainly help him manage the company well." Ariadne shook her head vigorously and sobbed. "Tell the search and rescue team to keep looking. If they can't find him in one day, then search for 10 days or a whole month. Even if it takes a year, I have the time and money for it. However much they want to keep searching, I'll pay it. Caspian promised to spend my birthday with me. He can't just break his promise." Ronan looked at her sympathetically. "We know it's hard for you to accept this right now, but it's the truth. You have to learn to accept this," Caspian's lawyer told Ariadne calmly. "Mr. Hawthorne left a will, stating that if any accident were to befall him, all his assets would be inherited by Miss Ariadne Sinclair." Ariadne took Caspian's asset documents, flipped through them, and then, pretending she couldn't handle the grief, pushed the door open and ran away. Otherwise, she was afraid she wouldn't be able to control herself and would burst out laughing. After returning to her multi-million-dollar mega mansion, she lay on her massive king-size bed, rolling around in sheer joy. Grandpa Hawthorne had passed away a year ago, so there was no one left to fight her for the inheritance. The Hawthorne family's billions in assets would all belong to her. It was entirely worth it to play the role of a deeply devoted wife to that scumbag for so long after her rebirth. Looking at the vast wealth she was about to inherit, she snorted with laughter. As for Caspian, that dead scumbag, Since he loved faking his death so much, she would just let him truly stay dead. Whenever she thought about what happened in her previous life, her heart turned as cold as a butcher's knife that had been slaughtering fish in a supermarket for 10 years. In her previous life, 3 years into their marriage, Caspian had met his so-called true love. In order to pursue her and prove the loyalty of their romance, he chose to fake his death and conceal his identity. However, he couldn't let go of everything the Hawthorne family owned, so he set his sights on Ariadne. He began to pretend to fall in love with her bit by bit, until it seemed his feelings were deeply rooted, turning him into the famous, doting husband praised by the media. She was gradually moved by him and fell deeply in love with him too. Back then, she even joked with Caspian that the two of them were keeping up with the modern trend of marriage first, love later. Upon hearing that, he just smiled and stroked her hair, but she had failed to notice the mockery hidden in his eyes. After he died, even though she had suitors, she never remarried. She stayed with the Hawthorne family to help manage his estate, eventually collapsing from exhaustion until her days were numbered. Reborn, she was no longer a lovesick fool. Facing Caspian's deep affection, she used all her acting skills to pretend she was completely moved to tears by him. Her efforts were not in vain. He firmly believed that she loved him deeply. He believed her love was profound enough that she would manage everything for him after his death, allowing him to just sit back and reap the rewards upon his return. Therefore, in the eyes of outsiders, they were the golden couple, a match made in heaven. No one could have imagined that this young couple was secretly calculating against each other in their hearts. She diligently managed the company affairs for Caspian, letting him continue living his life as a wealthy heir. Every second she spent with him, she chanted in her heart, "Inheritance, I want the inheritance." Once he faked his death, the Hawthorne family's commercial empire and billions in assets would all be hers. Heaven rewards the diligent, and she finally waited until this day. Massive fortune, here she comes. 5 days later, Ariadne held a grand funeral for Caspian. She immediately processed his death certificate and had his records legally closed out. From then on, Caspian, the heir to the Hawthorne Group, was nothing more than a legally certified dead person. This time, Ariadne handled Caspian's funeral personally, refusing to hand the arrangements over to his 2 childhood friends. They were hesitant at first. Lachlan urged her, "Don't push yourself too hard. Ronan and I have been Caspian's brothers for years. Leave the funeral arrangements to us. You need to get some good rest. You'll be busy enough with the group's affairs later." Acting as if her heart was utterly dead from grief, she replied, "I want to see him off on his final journey myself. He loved me so much, he would definitely want me by his side for this last stretch. Don't you think?" The 2 men looked at each other in dismay. They were probably trying to figure out a reasonable excuse to refuse her. As Caspian's childhood friends, the 2 of them were fully aware of his fake death plan and had been helping him put on a show in front of her the entire time. In her previous life, she had been too overwhelmed with grief and had left the funeral arrangements entirely to them. They had kept it highly secretive and incredibly simple, and the news of Caspian's death wasn't widely publicized by the media. Everything was completely unfitting for his status as the golden boy of the elite circle. But how could she have noticed anything fishy back then? In this life, however, she was going to give him a funeral so grand that the whole world would know about it, just to avenge his scheming. Ronan took a deep breath and said, "Ariadne, it's not that we aren't willing. It's just that Caspian definitely wouldn't want you to have to worry about his funeral arrangements while you're grieving. It would break his heart." Inwardly, she admired his ability to lie straight through his teeth. On the surface, however, she wore an expression of utter devastation. "He handled every detail of our wedding himself. To see things through from beginning to end, I will personally handle his funeral. He loved me so deeply, and I must repay his devotion. You don't need to try and persuade me. My mind is made up. If you keep trying to stop me, I'll have to question what your ulterior motives are." Seeing that she had spoken so harshly, they finally nodded in agreement. In her heart, she was screaming like a joyful groundhog. This staggering wealth would soon be hers. She contacted all the major media outlets and broadcasted the news of the elite circle's golden boy dying in a tragic accident. The news quickly shot to the #1 spot on the trending search lists, and soon, almost everyone in the country knew about it. On the day of the funeral, the elites who attended all watched her cry uncontrollably. Outside the venue, the reporters' camera flashes fired continuously. After the ceremony ended, she was surrounded by major media outlets as she tried to leave. They shoved their microphones right up to her face. "Miss Sinclair, as Mr. Hawthorne's wife, do you think there's anything suspicious about his death?" "That's right. After all, Mr. Hawthorne has been into extreme sports since his teenage years. It's no exaggeration to call him a veteran. How could he suddenly die in an accident this time?" We heard the search and rescue team didn't find Mr. Hawthorne's body. How can you be so sure he's actually dead? Their questions came one after another. Excellent. You know exactly what to ask. Keep them coming, she thought. She noticed that Ronan and Lachlan had already broken out in cold sweats, and she laughed inwardly. On the surface, though, she was just a pitiful woman who had just lost her husband and her pillar of support. She acted dizzy and overwhelmed by the reporter's aggressive questions, forced to take several steps back. How could she be the one to answer these questions? After all, she was just a poor widow who only found out her husband was dead when she was notified. Stepping in to save the day, Ronan and Lachlan came forward to respond. That's more like it. Good brothers should always help each other out. Having them personally confirm the lie was far better than her trying to explain it. Ronan took a microphone and said, "All right, please. Lachlan and I were at the scene. We saw with our own eyes that he accidentally fell while bungee jumping. Many others who were there saw it too." Lachlan chimed in. "We had the search and rescue team look multiple times, but they couldn't find Caspian. It's highly likely that Mr. Hawthorne fell prey to wild animals. With such a tragedy, the most heartbroken person here is Mr. Hawthorne's wife, Miss Ariadne Sinclair. Please, friends from the media, give her some space and stop hounding her with questions." The reporters finally stopped pressing about Caspian's death and instead turned their attention to the future of the Hawthorne Group. With Mr. Hawthorne dead, where does the Hawthorne Group go from here? Miss Sinclair, what are your plans moving forward? The head of the Hawthorne Group's public relations department stepped up to take that question. "There's no need for everyone to worry about this," the PR director answered. "Previously, Miss Sinclair led us in our endeavors, and she will continue to lead our company in the future. We believe that under her leadership, our group will only get better and better." They were in charge of doing the talking, while Ariadne simply nodded frequently in agreement. Afterward, she watched those interview clips over and over again and saved them. All of this signified that Caspian was now a thing of the past. From here on out, the Hawthorne Group was her empire. With the will Caspian had drawn up before his death, she smoothly inherited his family's commercial empire. Now that she had some free time, she could check in on Caspian's current situation. She had hired a professional private investigator at a high price to keep an eye on him around the clock. If this lunatic wanted to play a game of true love, he could have simply divorced her before going after Serafina. But he just had to fake his deep affection instead, making her helplessly fall in love with him and work her fingers to the bone for him. She wouldn't let him have his smug satisfaction ever again. Looking at the files sent by the private investigator, Ariadne couldn't help but sneer. Caspian had pretended to pass out near Serafina's house. After being saved and taken in by her, he feigned amnesia and successfully managed to stay at her place. Now, he was actively pursuing Serafina. She had to admit, his handsome face, which could rival any movie star's, gave him an absolute advantage in romance. In her previous life, even she couldn't escape his tender offensive. Now, Serafina naturally found herself helplessly falling for him too. Serafina lived in the countryside, where the internet connection wasn't very stable, so Caspian rarely checked the news notifications on his phone anymore. Because of this, he had no idea that he was already a dead man in the eyes of the public, or that his title as the golden boy of the elite circle had already been passed on to someone else. In her previous life, Caspian smugly believed that Serafina had fallen in love with him while he was penniless, firmly convinced that they were true love. Ariadne, however, didn't think so. After all, this wasn't the first time Serafina and Caspian had met. Back then, Ariadne, Caspian, and some friends had planned a trip to a countryside farmhouse resort. There, they ran into Serafina, who happened to be working at the resort to help support her family. After casually chatting for a bit, Serafina had inadvertently said, "If I like someone, as long as he treats me well, I'll be with him whether he has money or not." "Miss Sinclair, you're so lucky to have such an outstanding partner like Mr. Hawthorne. If I had a partner like him, I'd be willing to eat dirt and suffer through hardships by his side." Blushing, she had stolen a glance at Caspian, and with just that one look, she had walked straight into Caspian's heart. When Ariadne was reborn, the two of them had already met. Wanting to know how their relationship developed, she specifically looked into it. After returning from the farmhouse that time, Caspian had his assistant look up Serafina's background. He discovered that despite being poor, Serafina had high aspirations. She was kind-hearted, optimistic, and not at all the type of gold digger who despised the poor and worshipped the rich. For a wealthy young master like him, who was born with a silver spoon in his mouth and had parents who only threw money at him but rarely kept him company, Serafina's appeal was undoubtedly immense. Caspian wasn't very satisfied with Ariadne, his arranged wife, either. He started plotting how to kick her to the curb without affecting the company's development, while still managing to win the beauty's heart. In the end, his approach was exactly the same as in his previous life. This bastard started making his move on her. He began to pretend to like her, and she did her best to play along with his deeply affectionate act. Their relationship seemingly deepened gradually, until they were in love. Caspian transformed into a doting husband, and news of him spending fortunes to buy lavish gifts for his wife frequently appeared in the media. He waited until the time was ripe, believing that she had fallen completely in love with him and could no longer live without him. Then, he faked his death to pursue his true love as a penniless man. After all, in his eyes, given how much she loved him, she would definitely help him safeguard everything the Hawthorne family owned. However, after her rebirth, he was nothing more than a greasy, disgusting scumbag in her eyes. No matter how much he strutted and showed off like a peacock in front of her, she remained completely indifferent. Any affection she had for him had been completely extinguished the moment he set his vicious plan into motion. Therefore, when Caspian booked that bungee-jumping excursion again, she was thrilled beyond measure. She was about to inherit his billions in asset show. Could she possibly stay calm? Judging from the photos in the investigator's file, Caspian and Serafina were getting along quite well, with sparks of love faintly igniting between them. Serafina took great care of the amnesiac Caspian, which only solidified his belief that she was a good girl who didn't care about wealth or status. Ariadne couldn't help but marvel at Caspian's sheer luck. Before her, his grandfather and parents had provided him with a life of absolute luxury, free from any worries. After his relatives passed away one by one, he had a wife like her to manage the company for him, allowing him to be a carefree, domineering CEO. Now, by Serafina's side, he was treated with utmost tenderness and care, not even having to lift a finger for the smallest chores. He truly had the perfect, charmed life of a pampered young master. It wasn't long before she received the news that the two of them had officially become a couple. Caspian had always been a natural when it came to sweet talk. He promised Serafina, even though I've lost my memories, my love for you will never change, even if I get them back someday. Once they entered their honeymoon phase, Ariadne temporarily pushed them out of her mind. Because now that she had inherited the entire Hawthorne estate, her scumbag father and stepmother were drooling over her wealth. Her father had repeatedly called her to come home for dinner. To put an end to it once and for all, she finally made time to visit. At the dinner table, her father put on a facade of deep paternal love. Feigning concern, he said, "Ariadne, eat up. You've been working so hard lately. I know you're hurting the most over Caspian's death, but it's okay. You still have your dad to rely on." Whether or not he could be relied on was something she had figured out years ago. Ever since her mother passed away and he remarried, that house had ceased to be her home. Now, apart from money, which would never betray her, what else could she possibly trust? Seeing her focus entirely on eating and drinking without uttering a word in response, her father didn't seem embarrassed in the slightest. He just kept talking. "The Hawthorne family's business is massive. If it's too much for you to manage alone, I can help shoulder some of the burden. And then there's your younger brother. He really looks up to his big sister. He's working at the company now, so you should take him out more and show him the ropes. You're siblings, after all. You'll have to support each other in the future." She looked up at him and said, "Thanks, Dad. But even though managing the Hawthorne estate is hard work, I enjoy it immensely. So, there's no need to trouble you. As for anyone else, I don't have the patience to play along. This whole happy family act has never had anything to do with me, has it?" Her stepmother interjected, visibly displeased. "Your husband is dead and you have no children. Who else are you going to rely on in the future, if not your own family? This household raised you for over 20 years. Is it really too much to ask for a piece of the pie?" Ariadne shot her a cold glare. The woman's eyes were brimming with raw ambition. Ever since Ariadne got married, this was the first time her stepmother had directly asked for a handout. Usually, she manipulated Ariadne's father into asking on her behalf. Too bad Ariadne had never given in, not even once. She replied coldly, "Relying on others is never as good as relying on yourself. That's a lesson I learned right here in this house. I'll spell it out for you. There is no share of the Hawthorne estate for you. Stop dreaming." Her father grew anxious. "You kid, why are you drawing such clear lines? Those were issues between the adults. It has nothing to do with your brother. You still need to help him out." "Don't," Ariadne retorted sharply. "My mother only ever had one daughter, so I absolutely do not recognize any younger brother." Ariadne continued sharply. "The family business is only passed down to sons, not daughters. Right after your son graduated from college, you put him straight into upper management. He never trained at the ground level, has no idea how to run a business. and has cost the company a fortune. Aren't you just trying to get me to bail him out? That's the only reason you're suddenly playing the affectionate father with me. But Dad, did you ever stop to think if you even deserve it? Her father threw down his chopsticks, his face turning dark. You think you're all grown up and powerful now, don't you? He sneered. How dare you speak to me like that? Ariadne just smiled. Don't get too angry. After all, you'll have plenty more to be angry about in the future. I'm full, so I'll be taking my leave. Enjoy your meal. With that, she put down her chopsticks, stood up, and walked away. Her father cursed frantically behind her, calling her an unfilial daughter. She couldn't help but sneer. He really couldn't read the situation at all. The story of her parents could be summed up in one sentence. A wealthy heiress whose entire family fortune was ruthlessly drained by an opportunistic social climber. Unable to handle the blow, her mother had passed away in depression, leaving Ariadne behind to suffer years of grievance in that house. Now, she finally had the power to get justice for her mother. It was getting chilly. It was time for the Sinclair family to go bankrupt. She figured that a romance filled with setbacks was the only way to create an unforgettable love story. Caspian was currently facing a situation where two men were fighting over one woman. Serafina had another suitor named Carter. Carter's family ran a resort near Serafina's hometown, making him a wealthy heir in his own right. In the past, Caspian wouldn't have even batted an eye at the guy's net, but now, he was a grown man who had lost his memory, had absolutely nothing, and had to rely on Serafina to support him. There was simply no comparison. Before Carter appeared, Caspian's pursuit of Serafina consisted of nothing but sweet words without him spending a single cent. He genuinely believed that a romance tainted by money was no longer true love. In their daily life together, when Serafina was doing chores, Caspian would just sit on the side watching her work, praising her for being such a virtuous woman and saying that whoever married her in the future would be incredibly lucky. After coming home from work, Serafina still had to drag her exhausted body around to clean up the trash Caspian had left all over the house throughout the day. Caspian was used to living a pampered life. He was the type of person who wouldn't even lift a finger to pick up a fallen bottle of oil at home. So, it was always Serafina serving him. Caspian wanted to test his true love, considering all of this as his trials for her. But after Carter showed up, things changed. Serafina finally experienced what it felt like to be genuinely pursued and valued. Carter would send her flowers and gifts. When she was tired, he would considerately say, "Let me do it. Go rest for a bit and drink some water. I bought you some food, so have a bite to hold you over. Don't starve yourself." With the comparison laid bare, Caspian's attempts at wooing her seemed embarrassingly inadequate. Serafina also seemed to have grown tired of this life of serving Caspian every day, watching him just sit there while she busied herself, completely unwilling to even lend a helping hand. Taking the initiative, she pulled out photos of Caspian to show him, attempting to awaken his memories so they could return to the Hawthorne family to live in a grand mansion and enjoy a life of luxury. Caspian stiffened all over, pretending to have a headache and claiming he couldn't remember anything. In reality, he probably wanted to return to the Hawthorne family, more than anyone else, to resume his role as the elite circle's golden boy. In his previous life, he had deposited a sum of money in advance onto a secret bank card. During the time he faked his death, he would just withdraw money whenever he needed it, so he lived quite comfortably. Moreover, Ariadne had collapsed from exhaustion in the 4th year after his faked death. After she died, he smoothly took over everything she had left behind. At that time, she had just finished negotiating a massive project with the government, a project that could guarantee the Hawthorne Group wealth for the next 20 years. So, he and Serafina just sat back and reaped the rewards. He didn't have to work hard at all, and simply continued his lifestyle as a pampered young master. In this life, however, Ariadne had processed his death certificate, and all the money under his name had been transferred to her accounts. He was now truly and utterly penniless. Having no other choice, he had to seek out his 2 childhood friends. According to the files sent by the private investigator, Caspian had met with Lachlan and Ronan to discuss his return to the Hawthorne family. This was happening much earlier than in his previous life. Back then, he was living quite comfortably on the outside, so he hadn't been in any hurry to return. In this life, having experienced what it was like to be truly broke, he finally understood the importance of money. The ordinary life of daily necessities simply couldn't exist without it. Ariadne listened to the audio recording of their conversation. Caspian said, "Serafina has passed my test. She and I are true love. I'm planning to bring her back to the Hawthorne family. As for Ariadne, I will divorce her and give her a substantial amount of assets." "Well, thank you very much," she thought sarcastically. He hadn't contributed a single thing to the Hawthorne group. She was the one holding it all together. Yet the moment he returned, he wanted to kick her out. Caspian was truly ruthless. Lachlan said, "Caspian, this might be a bit difficult. You don't know this, but the entire internet thinks you're already dead. Plus, Ariadne has already processed your death certificate. Your legal identity has been completely erased." Hearing this, Caspian grew anxious and asked, "What? How could you guys just let her do that?" Ronan smiled bitterly and replied, "We initially told her that the two of us would handle your funeral arrangements, but as your wife, she insisted on accompanying you on your final journey. We had no standing to refuse." Lachlan added, "Who knew she would act so fast? By the time we found out, your death certificate had already been issued." Recently, Ariadne had been negotiating a collaboration with Ronan's father's company, and Ronan had been shadowing the process to learn the ropes. In the recording, she then heard Ronan say to Caspian, "Caspian, since you no longer exist in this world, why don't you just stay by Seraphina's side? Weren't you pursuing true love anyway? True love conquers all. The two of you can just live off love and fresh air." Caspian couldn't believe that his childhood friend would backstab him like this. He started cursing at them furiously. In the end, even Lachlan stopped speaking up for him. Ariadne remembered that a while ago, Lachlan's family business had run into some problems, and she had introduced a few deals to help them tide over the crisis. Having accepted her favors, their hands were tied. Lachlan, too, now stood completely against Caspian. Neither of Caspian's childhood friends supported his return. After all, since she took over, she had taken good care of both their families' businesses, and they weren't willing to lose this highly profitable situation. This was perfect. Caspian had lost his status, was entirely penniless, and had lost his friends. He had become completely isolated. It was incredibly satisfying. As for the Sinclair family, her father had been calling her constantly these past few days, even trying to come to the company to see her. One day, he finally managed to force his way in front of her. His eyes were bloodshot, and he looked haggard. Slouching slightly, he pleaded in a fawning tone, "Ariadne, please help your dad. The company's cash flow is broken. If we don't get new funds injected, the company will go bankrupt. This is my life's work. I can't just watch it all go to waste." She shook her head and said, "Dad, you've reached retirement age anyway. Why don't you just step down?" His eyes suddenly lit up. Like a drowning man grasping at a straw, he said eagerly, "Ariadne, why don't you provide the capital to acquire the Sinclair Group? Rather than letting someone else benefit, I'd much rather have you acquire it. All you'd have to do is give me a portion of the Hawthorne Group's shares in return." Her father spoke with fervent excitement, his expression practically crazed, as if he could already envision the days when he would be a shareholder of the Hawthorne Group after she agreed. If her mother had seen his greedy, opportunistic true colors earlier, she never would have been deceived to the point of losing her life. Ariadne replied coldly, "Don't think I don't know this is your precious son's masterpiece. Let it go bankrupt. I will pay whatever legal maintenance I owe you on time in the future, but everything else is off the table." Her father tried to bargain. "How about this? I'll include your name in my will from now on. I promise your brother's share won't exceed yours." She shook her head with a laugh. "Dad, keep your pathetic scraps for your precious son to inherit. So what if it goes bankrupt? Didn't my mother have to watch helplessly as her own family's wealth was completely devoured by you back then? This is what she went through. It's only fair that you experience the same." Shocked, he pointed a trembling finger at her. "What? Did you do this to the company?" She replied calmly, "This is my payback for you abandoning your first wife and neglecting me for all these years. By the way, your situation is actually much better than my mother's was. After all, back then, she also had to face her husband's infidelity to their marriage." He suddenly yelled, "Ariadne, I am your father. There is no such thing as parents being in the wrong. Even if I truly wronged you, you can't be this unfilial and treasonous." She simply had security escort him out. After the Sinclair Group went bankrupt, his family was forced to move into a cramped 3-bedroom apartment. Her father, now middle-aged, had to re-enter the job market to look for work. In his youth, he had taken a shortcut by marrying a wealthy heiress, saving himself over 20 years of hard work. Now, it was finally time to pay it all back. Over on Caspian's side, out of consideration for their years of brotherhood, Ronan couldn't help but dig into his own pockets and give him a bank card with $500,000 on it. Given Caspian's past spending habits, that amount probably wouldn't have lasted him a single day. But according to Ronan's logic, since Caspian didn't want his true love tainted by money, and since Seraphina was an independent girl with a strong backbone, this sum would be more than enough for him to live comfortably. Caspian took the money and built a house for Seraphina's family in the countryside. The two of them then began to discuss marriage. Weddings in Seraphina's hometown weren't that formal. They didn't require official household registration documents. They just needed to register locally in the village. Otherwise, how could a supposed amnesiac like Caspian possibly produce any identification or family records? Fortunately for him, this rustic arrangement had no actual legal binding. Otherwise, a charge of bigamy would have been enough to land him in serious trouble. As a result, it wasn't long before Caspian blew through all the money and went looking for Ronan for more. Ever since their last conversation fell apart, Caspian had harbored deep resentment toward his two childhood friends. Before setting his fake death plan in motion, he had discussed it with them, and both had patted their chests, guaranteeing they would help him pull the wool over Ariadne's eyes. Yet now, he had a home he couldn't return to, and had even lost the freedom to spend his own money. Caspian was furious, convinced that it was entirely their fault for not talking Ariadne out of processing his death certificate, which led to things spiraling out of control. Otherwise, he could have just returned to the Hawthorne family by now and resumed his life as the elite circle's golden boy. Ariadne knew Caspian definitely hadn't given up yet. Only an absolute fool would easily let go of such a massive family empire. He was just too arrogant and overconfident. He genuinely believed that she was helplessly in love with him and would safeguard the Hawthorne group on his behalf. He thought that by the time he won the beauty's heart, she would have taken the company to new heights for him, and then he could simply kick her to the curb and enjoy the fruits of her labor. Unfortunately for him, she was no longer that naive woman. She was a woman reborn, here solely to seek vengeance for the Ariadne of her previous life, whose sincere devotion had been so ruthlessly betrayed. To prevent Caspian from staging a comeback, she instructed the private investigator to keep an even closer eye on his every move going forward. Fortunately, Ariadne had stayed vigilant. Caspian truly resorted to any means necessary to snatch back his wealth. He had asked Ronan for another $1 million. It wasn't for his own expenses, but to hire a hitman. And the target, naturally, was Hurth, the wife who was blocking his path to riches. His viciousness truly chilled her to the bone. Since he wanted her life, she would just have to send him to his grave first. Ariadne invited Ronan and Lachlan out for tea. For 10 minutes, they sat there while she remained silent about why she had asked them to meet. Ronan couldn't sit still any longer. He asked cautiously, "Ariadne, what did you need to see us about?" She set down her teacup and asked with a fake smile, "Are you two hiding something from me?" Lachlan feigned confusion, asking, "Why would you ask that?" "For instance," she said, "how is Caspian doing nowadays?" The expressions on their faces instantly changed. Ronan put on a miserable face and said, "Caspian, isn't he already dead? Why are you bringing him up again?" Ariadne laughed bleakly. "Are you still not going to tell the truth?" Ronan avoided her gaze and muttered, "I'm sorry." Lachlan took a deep breath and said, "Ariadne, we're sorry. We shouldn't have cooperated with Caspian to lie to you. He is still alive." "He's with his true love, Serafina." Ariadne's tears fell on cue. "I knew my instincts weren't wrong," she sobbed. "He really is still alive. Does he just hate me that much? To the point where he'd fake his own death just to leave me and be with that woman?" Lachlan comforted her. "Ariadne, please don't be sad. He doesn't have you in his heart. He'd rather abandon everything to be with someone else. You need to plan for yourself too. Look at how well the Hawthorne group has developed since you took full charge. You should walk your own path and make those with no foresight regret their choices." Ariadne couldn't help but find it ironic. Lachlan and Caspian's brotherhood wasn't all that sincere after all. Thinking carefully about it, Caspian had thrown his weight around since childhood. Relying on his family's background, everyone had to show him respect. As for his childhood friends getting close to him, how much of it was out of genuine affection, and how much was out of consideration for their own family's development? Who knew? Now that she was in charge of the company's major decisions, out of mutual interest, she had brought Lachlan and Ronan's families into a massive collaborative project. Lachlan and Ronan knew very well that if the collaboration fell through because of them, they would have no standing left within their own families. Therefore, it was completely understandable that they chose to surrender their loyalty to her. She asked them to help arrange a meeting with Caspian, stating that she wanted to make a clean break with him. Acting heartbroken, she said, "Actually, I received some news. Someone is trying to hire a hitman to kill me, and that person is Caspian." They exchanged a look and readily agreed. In the end, they helped her set the meeting location with Caspian on a yacht. These rich kids always loved going out to sea for fun. Caspian's time was up, so she might as well give him a final send-off. Caspian was enjoying the sea breeze for the first time in a long while, taking a very leisurely sip of red wine. He sighed in contentment, remarking that this was the life he was meant to live. Ariadne clapped her hands and said, "Caspian, long time no see. You haven't been doing too well lately, have you? It's been a while since you enjoyed this luxurious, pampered young master lifestyle, hasn't it?" Caspian was startled. Why is it you? Lachlan and Ronan invited me. Why are you the one who showed up? They betrayed me. Ariadne laughed in amusement. Don't blame others, Caspian, because you're no saint yourself. Caspian declared war on her. Ariadne, did you know about my plan all along? Is that why you were so ruthless and completely cut off my means of retreat? Let me tell you, I'm going back to the Hawthorne family to take back everything that's mine. She nodded. But in the eyes of the public, you are already a dead man, she pointed out. Even if you go back, there is no place for you anymore. Caspian was furious. Didn't you love me so much? Why would you set me up like this? Ariadne replied coldly. You were heartless first, so I could only be ruthless in return. Don't be angry. The Hawthorne group will always belong to the Hawthornes. I'm not like my father. It's just that the Hawthorne Empire is now my, Ariadne's, territory, but it will never be yours, Caspian. Caspian took a huge gulp of his wine and gritted his teeth. Don't be too smug for too long. Be careful. You might have money to spend, but no life to live. He could only utter empty threats. He probably wouldn't even be able to leave here today. She took one last, deep look at him. He was alone on the yacht, drowning his sorrows in alcohol, leaning against the railing in a drunken stupor. After she turned around and walked away, she only heard what sounded like a heavy object falling into the water behind her. She didn't look back. He wasn't worth her sympathy. Upon returning to the mansion, she couldn't help but relax. Lachlan and Ronan really hadn't disappointed her. For the sake of their respective families' futures, they chose to sacrifice their brotherhood with Caspian to curry favor with her. They were even more afraid than she was of Caspian returning and taking everything back. After all, they were the ones who had botched the job. Caspian would inevitably lash out at them. Meanwhile, she had significantly increased their speaking power within their own families. The railing on the yacht had been tampered with. As his former good brothers, they knew Caspian's living habits all too well. So, they had anticipated in advance that a drunk Caspian would lean against the railing to catch the sea breeze. From then on, Caspian was truly a dead man. As for Serafina, she waited and waited at home, but Caspian never returned. She secretly went to the vicinity of the Hawthorne group to ask around, but didn't hear anything about Caspian returning to the Hawthorne family. Disappointed, she went back alone. She later accepted Carter, the wealthy heir who had pursued her before. However, a few years into their marriage, he cheated on her, forcing her out of the house with absolutely nothing. She returned to the countryside all by herself. Her situation was a far cry from the wealthy, pampered socialite she was in her previous life. As for Ariadne, her career was now booming. Under her leadership, the Hawthorne group was thriving. Her future held boundless glory. She had completely bid farewell to the Ariadne Sinclair of her past life, who had suffered so painfully. Promotion, newfound wealth, and a dead husband this staggering fortune had finally arrived. The sun was shining brightly, and her future was brilliant. Her true blessings were still yet to come.
Such a satisfying ending. Sometimes the ultimate payback is simply taking back your power, cutting off toxic people, and owning your life. Let the greedy ones deal with the mess they created.